Welcome to Dittofi. In this video, I'm going to show you how to perform a create operation. So that is we're going to create a new directory listing in the Abuja directories. So as you can see here, we have the list of Abuja directories, and we're going to create a new listing in the database table. Also, I was able to change the description to use a single line text to make our job easier. Now the first step is to create a custom model. So this custom model, we're going to use it in the front end later on. So let's just create it now. I'm going to call the custom model input directory. I'm going to click save. And then we're going to add attributes that are similar to the database columns. So the first attribute, we're going to call it name. We'll click save. Then we're going to add another attribute. We'll call it description. Click save. All right. Then we're going to add another one. We'll call it image. Click save. Oh, we need to add the we'll add another attribute. We'll call it address. We'll call another address. Click the save button. And let's double check. So we have the name, image, and then we need to add category. We'll add the last one, call it category. Then we click save. The next step is to create a backend action. So we need to create an endpoint that will be triggered by the front end. So let's call the endpoint create listing. Then we'll add a trigger, we'll call it an endpoint. Then we need to pass variables to this endpoint. So these are information that will be passed to from the front end to the endpoint. So we'll add all the variables. So we have name, click save. Then we have description, we click save. Then we add address. Click save. Then we add category. We click save. And then we add the last one, I believe, is the image, which is going to be a URL. So we click save. Then we add a response variable. Let's call this response. It's going to be a model. And it's going to be the directory model. So basically, this is going to store the response from the endpoint. And we're going to pass it to the front end. So we also save it here. We also add it here as well. So the result of the events that we're going to create is going to be saved in the response variable, and this is going to be sent back to the front end. So the event type is going to be the create database request, which uses directory model, and then we append each field to the endpoint query variable that we just created. Category, endpoint, category, click OK. Description, no, not ID. description, endpoint description, image, endpoint image, name, endpoint name, and we click then as created listing, and we click on save. All right, so let's build this code and test it out. So click on build code. So this shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. All right, so let's test it out. So we click on run action and just put test, run. So we have to build the code again. So just one more time. What this error message is saying that the code hasn't been deployed yet. So this can happen maybe due to some network connectivity issues or yep. Then we try again. So let's try again. Fine. So we get a 200 success response, and then we check the database. Let's go back. Let's refresh it, and then we see the new entry in the database. So in the next video, we're going to show how to create a listing using front-end elements. Welcome to Dittofi. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a directory listing in our Abuja directories page. So in the previous video, I showed you how to set up the backend actions plus setting up an endpoint to create a listing in our database. So now in this video, we're going to try and create front-end elements and connect them to the endpoints so that a user can create a listing in our database. So as you can see, I created a new page and I called it create listing. I also changed the URL, so it's going to be /create listing. And then the first step, we're going to add a header. So let's first add a div block. So we can add some padding around it. Container LG. All right. Then we can add a heading inside it. Let's call this create listing. All right. Can add another div. Give it some margin around. Then what we need to do is add a form group or form block inside it. So we can change this to name. Let's copy the entire form block. So we can come here, select of the form group, can come here, select it, copy, paste after. Copy, paste after. You can call this image, copy the form group, paste after. We can call this address. Copy the form group, paste after. And we're going to call this category. That's good. So then we can add, let's add a paragraph text. Let's add it after, or we can just add it inside. Delete this one. So this paragraph text will tell us if it's successful or not. So we're going to bind it to a variable. So let's create a new variable. Let's call it success. success message, save. Let's add some styling to it. Let's give it a green styling. Then we can copy this, paste after. Let's bind this to the success message. So it's only going to show, so we want this to only show if there's a success message. So we're going to add a formula and just success message. Press OK. Then we need to create a new variable. We'll call it error message. Error text message. Then let's change the color to text. And then we can bind it. Let's use this one to error text message. Then we can decide not to show it. Error text message. All right. So now let's bind each text input to the single directory variable we created in earlier video. So we have a variable called single directory. It has a model kind, and it maps directly to the database model directory. So we need to bind each element to the single directory model. So single directory name, single directory, description, single directory, image, address, single directory, category. That's fine. So then we now create a frontend action. Let's create a frontend action. We'll call it create listing. We click enter, and then we add an event. So we're going to run the endpoints. The endpoint that we created is create listing. So we want the result of the endpoint to be saved in a variable called create listing. And then we can create, then we want the status code. So each endpoint returns a status code indicating whether it's successful or not. A success status code has a value of 200. A failure status code mostly has a value of 500 or 404. So we'll create a variable called create listing code, and then we map the query variables to the single directory. So address, category, description, image, and then name. Then we click save. So we need to check if the endpoint runs successfully. So add an event below. Then we'll change we'll use a conditional statement. We want to check if the event runs successfully. So we need to create a new variable. So let's create this variable. It's gonna have a kind of number. Let's call it success code 200. Okay, we already have something like that. HTTP. So we want to check if the create listing code is equals to 200. We click on save. So if it is equal to 200, we add an event inside, then we update the success message. So we set the variable. So the variable that we created, success message, we give it a value. Let's call it success. We can call it success text. We give it a value of successfully created or created successfully. And we add the value there. All right. So in order to be sure, create code is equals to 200. Click save. So let's add another event below. So if it's not equal to 200, we want to return an error message. So this is how it's going to be done. Create listing code is not equal to 200. So we add a condition. Create listing code is not equals to 200. All right, so the next step is we need to save the error message in the app variable we created earlier. So I created a variable called error text, and I cached the sample error message we want to save if there's an error. And so, as you can see, when the create listing code is not equal to 200, we need to do something. So we'll add an event inside. So it's going to be called a set field event. So we set the error text message that we created as an app variable. We set the variable, the value in the variable error text that we created in this action. Then we click on the save button. We navigate back to the front end. So then we double check. We ensure that we're using the default type for each field. So ensure that it's the default type and not the email type. Yep, defaults. Then we have to ensure that this information is gotten from the right place. So be careful not to use this. This use data from is to add a class. So we ensure it's from, you can see the text. So we ensure that use data from is from the right variable. So it's going to update the text. Instead of having insert paragraph here, we're going to have the actual text message from the front end action. Likewise for the error message. So we ensure that we're getting the data and we're using the data the right way. So we'll click on global error text message. Then we click on the build code so we can see what we've done. Let's close this. And then let's copy the page, the URL. Then we click on the preview button. All right. Nice. So then we add this here. Now we're here. Create listing. Let's get a new lounge. New listing to add. So let's say we call space lounge and bar. Update the name here. Then the description, you can copy this. You can add it here. Then the image, you can take this image. We can copy the image address. You can add it here. So let's find the address to the lounge. So this is the address. We can copy here. Then we can type launch. Then we click submit. Created successfully. Let's go back to the home page. Let's refresh. So we can see it was added successfully here. Yep. So we have the space launching bar here.